The cold wind howled through the streets as Evelyn Morgan wrapped her thin shawl tighter around her frail body. The fabric was old and worn, barely shielding her from the bitter winter air. She walked with slow, tired steps, her boots nearly falling apart, the soles barely holding against the frozen pavement. She had spent the entire day searching for work, but the answer was always the same: a dismissive shake of the head or an outright refusal. No one wanted to hire a girl with no experience, no education, and no connections. The weight of her circumstances pressed down on her shoulders, making her feel small and invisible. Evelyn had never imagined her life would turn out this way. Just a few years ago, she had a home, a family, and dreams. But fate had been unkind, snatching everything from her grasp like a cruel thief in the night. Her father had been a kind man, working tirelessly as a carpenter to provide for his family. He had built their little cottage with his own hands, filling it with warmth and love. But love could not protect against illness. When the fever took him, there was nothing they could do. They had no money for a doctor, no medicine to ease his pain. Her mother had tried to hold the family together, sewing garments for wealthy clients to make ends meet. But the stress and grief had eaten away at her, and soon she too had fallen ill. Evelyn had watched helplessly as her mother's strength faded day by day until one morning she simply didn't wake up. That was the day Evelyn's world shattered. With no money to pay rent, she and her little brother, Samuel, were thrown onto the streets. Evelyn was only 17 at the time, and Samuel was barely 10. The world was not kind to children without protection, and soon they learned the cruel nature of hunger and cold. Evelyn did everything she could to keep Samuel safe. She begged on the streets, took on odd jobs, and even went days without eating just so her brother wouldn't starve. But the world was relentless, and tragedy struck again when Samuel fell ill. Desperate, Evelyn had pleaded with a wealthy merchant for help. She had offered to work for him, to clean his house, wash his clothes, anything in exchange for medicine for her brother. But the man had only laughed. "Why would I waste my money on a dying street rat?" he had sneered before slamming the door in her face. Samuel died that winter, his frail body unable to fight against the cold and sickness. Evelyn had buried him with trembling hands, alone and broken. The grief consumed her, turning the world gray. The only thing that kept her moving was the faint whisper of Samuel's voice in her mind, reminding her to survive. Years passed, and Evelyn's struggles only grew. She took whatever work she could find, washing clothes, cleaning houses, mending torn shoes. But no matter how hard she worked, it was never enough. One evening, as she sat by the river, watching the water ripple under the dim glow of the moon, a shadow fell over her. "Are you looking for work?" a voice asked. She turned to see a woman standing behind her, dressed in elegant clothing that contrasted starkly with the filth of the streets. Her face was sharp, her eyes calculating. "I can offer you a place to stay," the woman continued. "Food, clothes, warmth, but you must be willing to work hard." Evelyn hesitated. She had learned the hard way that offers of kindness often came with hidden prices. "What kind of work?" she asked. The woman smiled, but there was something cold in it. "Service. You will live in my house and do as you're told." Evelyn knew she had little choice. starving on the streets or taking a chance on this woman's offer. Neither option was ideal, but one at least offered survival. "I'll do it," she whispered. The woman, Madame Lizette, led Evelyn to a grand house on the outskirts of the city. From the outside, it looked like a place of luxury, but the moment Evelyn stepped inside, she felt the weight of something dark pressing against her chest. The house was filled with women, some younger, some older, all with the same hollow eyes. They worked tirelessly, scrubbing floors, serving wealthy guests, entertaining visitors. It didn't take long for Evelyn to realize that this was not a house of kindness, but a cage wrapped in silk. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. She worked until her hands bled, obeying every command, enduring every cruelty. She was nothing more than a pawn in Madame Lizette's game, a disposable servant in a world that thrived on power. But Evelyn refused to break. She watched, she listened, she learned. Every whispered conversation, every secret exchange. She gathered information like a thief, waiting for the right moment. And then one night, that moment arrived. A wealthy man visited the house, his pockets heavy with gold, his arrogance dripping like poison. Evelyn had heard whispers about him before. Mr. Donovan Blackwell, a man with connections, power, and a long list of crimes hidden beneath his wealth. As he sat in the parlor, drinking expensive wine, Evelyn made her move. She slipped into his study, her heart pounding. She had seen him hide documents there before, papers that held secrets worth more than gold. With trembling hands, she rifled through the drawers until she found it, a letter detailing Blackwell's illegal dealings, proof of corruption that could ruin him. Just as she tucked it into her dress, the door creaked open. And what do we have here? Evelyn spun around to see Blackwell standing in the doorway, his cold eyes locking onto her like a predator spotting prey. Her mind raced. If he caught her, she would never leave this house alive. "You're a clever one," he mused, stepping closer. "But cleverness won't save you." Evelyn took a deep breath, forcing steel into her voice. "Maybe not, but this will." She pulled out the letter and held it up. "If you harm me, this goes straight to the authorities." Blackwell's face darkened. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then he laughed. "You're playing a dangerous game, girl." Evelyn met his gaze, unwavering. "I've been playing it my whole life." Blackwell hesitated, then smirked. "Fine. You want freedom? Take it." And just like that, Evelyn walked out of the house, her heart hammering, her breath unsteady. She didn't stop until she reached the farthest part of the city, where no one knew her name. For the first time in years, she was free. She had nothing, no home, no money, no safety. But she had something far greater, hope. And this time, she wouldn't let the world take it away. Moral: even in the darkest places, strength and courage can lead to freedom.